Welcome, everyone, to this activist training called Changing Humanity's Future and Your Own. Become a master of living consciously so you can help train others to do the same. Neale and I look forward to being with you during this 8-week program that is perhaps the most important program that we've ever created, because it truly is about changing humanity's future and our own so we may create a sustainable and flourishing humankind and planet. And this will only happen through your life and leadership and the life and leadership of so many others all over the world. I'm going to briefly read the description of this first module, and then Neale and I will discuss this with you. The most important challenge facing you as an individual and the human race as a whole right now is that if we want to continue to exist in a relatively pleasant version of physicality, then we must take advantage of this perfect time for advancement for ourselves and our species. We are only one decision away from changing our future for the better forever through the process of each person evolving to the next level by embracing and demonstrating who they really are. There is no time to waste. It's time for us to self-identify as an awakened species and embrace our own divinity. But will we do it before causing irreparable damage to our civilization and planet? We are playing with matches. And those who self-identify as an awakened species are the fire department. The best way to fully awaken the self is to help in awakening another. And the best way to help in awakening another is to share your own process honestly and humbly. And now I'm going to go over to Neale, who's going to get us started here in this discussion.
Thank you, Steve. It's lovely to be here, and I'm grateful to all of you who've chosen to join us here in this program. Your very presence here, the fact that you've chosen to enroll or to participate or even just to check it out and to see what's going on is encouraging to me because as Steve just mentioned, and as I was told in my Conversations with God experience, this is a critical time. It's an important juncture in the evolution of our species. I want to contextualize, if I can, my understanding of all of this. Maybe I might just give you a tiny bit of background for those of you who may not be really clear that this activist training program is based on a conversation that I experienced having with God. We're all having conversations with God all the time, by the way. I want to make that very clear. I'm certain that I'm not the only person in the world who's having a conversation with God. In fact, the main message of Conversations with God, all the books, is that we're all having such conversations all the time. We're simply calling them something else, calling them, an epiphany or a sudden insight or women's intuition or whatever we can get away with calling that experience of receiving information, insights, understandings, clarity, awareness, sometimes even warnings from a source that feels very much like it's outside of ourselves. Where is that coming from? It doesn't feel like we're talking to ourselves. It feels like a source very much outside of ourselves. And it is, in a sense. But in another sense, it's not outside of ourselves. That what this source that we're feeling is feeling like it's outside of ourselves because it's so deep within ourselves. It's at the core of our being. And so I'm very clear from my conversations with God that we are all an aspect, an individuation of divinity. And this aspect is buried so deeply within us that we call it forth. We don't call on it. We're not calling on God to do things for us. We call it forth from within us to bring forth a sense of who we are and of what we can accomplish while we are here in the realm of the physical. Now, this is a critical time in the development of our species, as Steve and I have been mentioning here a couple of times now, because we are at that critical turning point. You know how it is for members of our species, for young people. They go through those teenage years, and there's a certain point of time, sometimes when they're 13, sometimes when they're 15, sometimes when they're 12, sometimes not till they're 18 or 19. But there's a certain point in that maturation process where we can see a shift from relatively childish ways of thinking, or at least a younger way of thinking, to an awareness, there's more going on here than meets the eye. And that's what's happening right now with our entire species. We have been a relatively young species. As species go in the universe, I'm told that Earthlings, human beings, are a relatively young species. And we're now moving through, if we could put it this way, analogously, as an analogy, that we're kind of like in our developmental years, in our teenage years, if you please. We've gotten out of our infancy, although we're still acting like children a lot on this planet, but at least we're getting to that place now where we can look at what we're doing and say, is this really what we want to do? Is this really who we want to be? And why? What is the whole point of this experience that we call life? And that's when I had my conversation with God, what became book number 4, a totally unexpected experience. I really thought, having written and produced, I didn't really write the books. They were written for me. I just took dictation from that source I was describing a moment ago. But all of a sudden, out of nowhere, after I thought that all of the Conversations with God books had been complete, I was awakened in the middle of the night and told, no, there's more to be done. There's one more mission that I have for all of you. And so it was a surprise book. I was not even expecting to have the experience. Years after I thought I was complete with the Conversations with God dialogues. And that became Conversations with God Book 4, with the subtitle, Awaken the Species. And that became the next invitation from God to humanity. So the question here today, and the reason that Steve and I and Humanity's team has created this activist training program, the question here today is, why are we here, and what role can all of us play individually and collectively in moving forward that agenda? So let me say that why we are here, in my understanding, is to self-realize. That is to realize or make real. You know how you Simonize a car? This is called realizing the self. We are actually self-realization in progress and in process. That's who we are, self-realization. And I'm told in Conversations with God that who we are is each of us an individuation of divinity. That is, there's no separation from us and God, no separation between us and that which is divine. We are all one. All things are one thing. There's only one thing, and all things are part of the one thing there is. So here we are. Now we've come into the physical realm in order to experience that, in order to have an opportunity to express and experience our true nature and who we are. And that's what all sentient beings do throughout the cosmos. Of course, there are civilizations elsewhere in the universe. I'm sure you realize that. And all of those civilizations which continue to exist have gone through this maturation process that we are now going through here on Earth. And the maturation process giving us a chance to decide really who are we as a species, and who do we choose to be? How do we choose to experience ourselves? And is the way we are currently experiencing ourselves the way we really want to be? Do we wish to be a species that starts wars with each other and kills thousands of our own species, thousands of the members of our own species, because we have a simple disagreement? For instance, over, maybe let's use a simple example, the borderline between two countries. We have a little dispute. If you had a dispute with your neighbor, that where the property line, my property ends and your property begins, we might have a legitimate disagreement about that. But would we kill each other over it? I would hope not. And yet countries do exactly that throughout human history, and it's happening even as we record this program. As I'm sure you all understand, of course, that what you're seeing right now is a recording. Steve and I have videotaped this program in advance. But at the time that we're videotaping this program, we have countries that are having a disagreement over where the border should be between the two countries. And thousands of people are dying as a result of that disagreement about real estate. I mean, really? Is this who we are as a species? Are we the kind of species that allows to move to a different topic, a different area of discussion, that allows 653 of our offspring, 653 of our children to die of starvation every week? No, actually, not every week, every day. No, actually, not every day, every hour. 653 children dying of starvation on this planet every hour, because as an advanced civilization, we can't figure out how to get food to them. We can't figure out how to get food to everybody. We still have 1.5 billion people on the planet who don't even have electricity. Did you hear what I just said? We have billions of people on the planet who don't even have electricity yet, living by candlelight in a civilization that calls itself an advanced species. We are now being invited to ask ourselves a crucial question. Is this who we are? And is this who we choose to be? And it's not, only a global question, in my experience. It's an individual question as well. Every morning when I wake up in my own wonderful home and living my own wonderful life, and I have a wonderful life, I still ask myself, is this who I choose to be? The way I just answered someone, the way I just responded, the way I just felt about something. Am I expressing the highest version I ever had? The highest idea I ever held about who I am and who I could possibly be? What would happen on this planet if we all stepped into the highest version of ourselves that we could possibly be? And what would happen if we decided that, in fact, we are not different from each other? I want to share something with you so you don't think that I'm just going off, on a rant. I'm sermonizing. There's an American television host named James Corden. James Corden, for many years, since 2015, was the host of a television program called The Late Late Show. It was on very, very late at night. He became very, very popular. Well, last night, the night before we recorded this program, James Corden left The Late Late Show after years of being highly successful. And he said that he had just seen life change so much. He said in his departing statement, over these past few years, this is James Corden talking, over these past few years, I've watched divisions grow, and I've seen and felt a sense of negativity bubble and at points boil over. But then he made an important comment. James Corden said, we are all more the same than we are different. There are so many people who are trying to stoke those differences, and we have to try as best we can to look for the light, look for the joy. If you do, it's out there. And that's what he had to say when he departed his show last night. And I thought, my gosh, he's reading from our script. That's the script that we want to share with you. I'm experiencing right now a level of alienation between people unlike anything I've ever seen before in our civilization. I've never seen this level of alienation that I'm seeing right now on this planet. When I was a young man, we had differences of opinion, of course. There will always be differences of opinion, but never the kind of alienation, not just in the country where I live, but in countries all over the world. I've never seen this level of alienation before between people of different races, different nations, different cultures, different religions, even different sexes. I mean, even different age groups, young people and older people. So much alienation now taking place on the planet. Because as James Corden, the comedian who hosts The Late Late Show until last night, as he said, people are stoking those differences and using those small, tiny differences in order to create the challenges that we are now facing on the planet today, in order to create power for themselves, but not power for us. So we're seeing this alienation taking place all over the world. And it's producing situations that are difficult for me to believe. I never would have thought that we would be in a situation where we would have a global pandemic. To give you one example, where we'd have a global pandemic and then have a discussion, an actual argument over how and when and if we're going to send the necessary medications to certain countries because it's not profitable to do so, or there isn't enough infrastructure to make sure that the medications reach all the people. So they go without the critical medications. They're simply not even shipped over there for those kinds of reasons. Unbelievable that such an event could take place on this planet. So I don't need to describe any more of the problems that humanity is facing. I'm sure you're aware of them. Perhaps you're already going, yeah, Neale, yeah, I know, I understand. Things are difficult. Things are challenging. But I was told in my conversation with God, this is the perfect time for our advancement. Things are difficult. Things are challenging. I'm sure you agree with me. But what we may not all agree on until now is that it's perfect that they are, because they are bringing us to a place where we all say, okay, this is not who we really are. This is not who we choose to be. So I have a suggestion I'd like to make. I think we need to decide definitively who we are as a species. Are we a species of physical animals? Bodies, basically, physical mammals roaming the earth? Or are we spiritual entities having a much larger agenda than any of us might have ever imagined? If I'm not my body, and I'm not my mind, if these are simply things I have, but not who I am, if who I am and who we are happens to be spiritual entities, that changes everything about our reason for being on the earth, our purpose for living life itself, and the possibilities that lie before us. And that's what we hope to explore in the activist training. What would it be like if we thought that all of us were really spiritual entities, and how would that impact our species on this planet? Steve?
Yeah, thank you, Neale. Sets the table well. And let me just come briefly back to what you're covering, the importance and urgency of what we're doing right now. Just to add to what Neale said about that book 4, Awaken the Species, the 9th book and the final book in the Conversations with God series, the book opens up by God saying to Neale that half the planet Earth is knocking my God's door down with prayer because of the challenges here on the earth, and people, moms, dads, kids, older people, praying and saying, my God, do we have a future here? This term existential crisis is surfacing more and more and more. And then God, this is a very inspiring book, because as Neale mentioned, what is shared is that we're one decision away from this sustainable and flourishing planet. That this is the perfect time for advancement for the human species, and that the hardest part of the journey, this was really a shocker for me, the hardest part of the journey is behind you. So just keep going. God is very inspiring in this book. Keep going. Look at what you've already done. You can get there. You will get there. Just keep going. Now, I want to bring in one other thing here for people that say, well, fine, the Conversations with God said this and so on. I'm going to read what Albert Einstein shared 75 years ago. And I think he said the same thing that God is saying in this Conversations with God book. He says, a human being is a part of a whole called by us universe. A part limited in time and space, he experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. Now, isn't that just what Neale said or he was talking about the people that are dying by the hour and the state of our world. And I mean, this is exactly what God is saying in Conversations with God. This is 75 years ago. So this activist training is just saying, we've read the books, we've been through the seminars and the retreats, we've taken the classes, and now it's our time. You know, we are now this is the moment where we pivot, we shift into this new way of living on the earth. And the interesting thing about it is if you've been following science is affirming all of this now. You can just take it from science. The Nobel Prize for Physics, October of last year, entanglement, where you're saying you can have two things on different sides of the cosmos that are affecting each other, even though there's no physical connection. This is one of the properties of oneness.
Yeah, the old saying, if a butterfly flaps its wings in Singapore, it affects life in San Francisco.
Yeah. So it is here. Science is it is here. Our moment is here. And all Neale and I are inviting us to do is we're saying this is a challenging time. Half the planet is knocking God's door down in prayer. We probably all of ourselves have been a part of that. Well, let's just each step up, be responsible, live into who we really are, our divinity, this oneness that even science is saying is true. They're saying we're sovereign to this one body. This is the same thing. We are all one. So all we're inviting us to do is not to create anything new at all. We're just saying, let's just live into ultimate reality that's here now, right? It's actually always been here, but maybe we didn't know it.
And the wonderful thing about this activist training is that it answers the question that so many people have, because lots of people who are listening to these words right now, as I mentioned a moment ago, are probably agreeing with us. Yes, this is a good time. Yes, change needs to be made. Yes, we are right at a pivotal moment. But the question is how to move us forward individually and collectively. And that's what the activist training is about. That's why we're so glad that you're enrolled, and you're going to love these modules, these individual segments that are going to be part of this activist training, because the activist training answers the question, how to get from where we are to where we want to be. We'll be sharing with you in this activist training principles, ideas, concepts, understandings, awarenesses, and powerful tools, hands-on tools that you can use to create the tomorrow of which we all yearn and of which we have all dreamed. That's what the activist training is about. Not just to transfer the information of these tools, but to help you become an activist in moving those tools into the lives of everyone whose life you touch, so that you and I can join together, becoming activists in actively changing the world.
Yes, and let me just say, it's easier than you think. We do cover the ground. We put it all in to this activist training, because this is such an important program that Neale and I have been working on this for months and months and months, and we've put all of the tools in to help you navigate this path. As we know, especially in the beginning, for where we're taking those first steps into living consciously, it can be challenging because a lot of times our friends and coworkers, even family members, aren't there. So we put it all in here, but this is easier than you think to live into our oneness. And when I read in the introduction, I want to come back to one of the things I said in the introduction that's important, is just that where God says, just live it honestly and humbly. And just as we talk to other people, this isn't a time for self-aggrandizement. We don't need to go there, and it's not true anyway. But there's a lot on the conscious journey, probably, that many of us already have under our belt, where we have some mastery. Good, share that. And then there are other things that we're working on, and good, we just share that. And where we just follow that simple process, and in these conversations that are happening all over the world now, where people are in these spiral down conversations of, oh my gosh, extreme weather and World War III is coming from the Ukraine, and all these things are true. Existential crisis is a possibility. We're not saying it's not. That's actually why this is such an important and urgent moment. But we're just inviting people, go through this program, and then you be the voice, you be the expression in those conversations that surface of, yeah, I know all of that, We don't have our head in the sand. We're very aware of these things going on, but look at, what has already been accomplished and what we're accomplishing with people all over the world where we're living consciously.
And one of the most intriguing aspects, I'm sorry, Steve, but I wanted to add that one of the most intriguing aspects of this program, folks, comes out of that book, Conversations with God, Book 4, where we are told the 9 characteristics of highly evolved beings in the universe. That God told us that there are highly evolved beings that exist elsewhere in the cosmos. I mean, on other planets, and even, of course, some highly evolved beings walking this planet. And in the book, God says, here are the 9 characteristics of highly evolved beings, what makes them different from the way the largest number of human beings are acting today. And that's part of this activist training. I'm going to share with you those 9 characteristics one by one, and we're going to look at them carefully, where you can either say, yeah, that's something I do right now, or we can say, to be honest, that's one thing I don't do right now. Thank you for bringing that up. So we get to look at those 9 characteristics on an individual basis. And boy, are we going to explore those deeply as part of this activist training.
Yes, we are. So as we wrap up here and we launch you into module 2 through 16, things like how to embrace your divinity, how to embrace the new spirituality, what Neale shared, all of these ways that highly evolved beings live out in the cosmos. All of this and more is in the balance of this activist training. We're glad you're here. Boy, this is such an important moment. We're in the pivot now. And as we shared just there in the introduction, it's all comes back to you and people all over the planet. Where we do this together, we take control of our destiny. We're responsible, accountable. We take control of our destiny, and we travel to this sustainable and flourishing home, community, and planet. And so let's go, let's do it. And Neale and I look forward to being back with you in module 16 at the end of the activist training to share more and to do a wrap up. So thanks again for being with us, everybody. Looking forward.